You're on.
We're good. Okay. Call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Today is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024, 9:03 a.m. Brett Woods,
Here.
Rick Bright,
Here.
Dennis Kuhn, Fred Knapp,
Here.
Jeff Hamstra, Ken Cawthorn,
Here.
and Thomas Hayes. We have quorum.
Yeah. Yes. Go around the room.
Dan Ice, Pima County.
Andrew Reese, City of Tucson Planning and Development.
Mark Mastic, City of Tucson. Edward Garcia on behalf of the Southern Arizona Home Builders Association and the Arizona Housing Association.
Rick Hollander, IEI, Independent Alliance of the Electrical Industry, formerly International Association of Electrical Inspectors.
Stephanie Spencer, Tacoma, Georgia.
Move on to item 2, 2024 IMC.
Sure. This is Ken Cawthorn. All right, so we did receive, I kind of shared some thoughts and some recommendations with both Pima County and City of Tucson. I did not receive the City of Tucson updated one based on what I sent, but I did receive it from Pima County. And basically, I don't know if you've all received it and seen it from the Pima County. So I'll just kind of go through some of the amendments, some of the highlights. The condensate discharge, we've already it's just the same as we've had before. We're just it's just one of the, oh, I know what it was, Dan. The item 1 should be already, yeah, item 1 should already, because now it's addressed, those items are addressed in that section. Okay. All right, and then next one was the space heating and cool, we were gonna adopt something similar to what the city had proposed and have a cooling system. And so I went ahead and just basically added to the end of what they had, basically saying evaporative coolers utilized to achieve this condition shall use an outdoor design condition of 66 wet bulb, which is dry enough that it basically creates air conditioned air. So that's, well, not quite air conditioned, but pretty good. And so we should be able to achieve the 85 degrees with that. And so that's what was being adopted there. The minimum ventilation rates, as I had mentioned before several times, there's been we've gone through and we've removed the outpatient healthcare facilities and its related footnotes from the table. And we just said that ambulatory care facilities are going to be revised as just say healthcare facilities. And we've kind of described all that, which I think is a pretty good description in that 4071, which goes through, and it just goes, and it also goes into 4072, where you might have some mixed occupancies or spaces that are not defined, and it kind of gives some direction there. What I wanted to point out, and I did point out, is that between healthcare, the biggest change was healthcare and vet clinics in the which I think I talked about last month, was in as far as the ventilation requirements. So the vet clinics are now going to basically require 100% outside air. So they're either going to be evap cooled, or they're going to have these expensive air conditioning systems to be able to meet the requirements in IMC. I'm not sure what else to say. It's been there in ASHRAE for a number of years. It's just IMC's catching up, and it's unfortunate that now veterinary spaces are gonna be hit with a big burden. I don't know how else to say it. Then I also pointed out that medical spaces are also going to increase. So they're going to basically double the amount of outside air that's currently required. So what I was pointing out was that a typical medical office building requires about 10% outside air. And now they're going to require about 20% outside air using the new code. So what I did kind of bring up to everybody's attention is I didn't know if we should do this in an amendment, but Bob Sherry pointed out it's already in the IMC that if we got an existing medical office building and they're just renovating it, I don't need to bring the ventilation up to the current codes because it's staying the same occupancy. And so he says that's already in the code that you don't need to do that. So I just wanted to point that out, that because we've got these big high-rise medical office buildings at St. Mary's, St. Joe's, TMC, all these places where we're locked in as far as our ventilation rates, because if we start changing those, then we have to change the entire facility, which I don't think we want to change hundreds of thousands of square feet over a 1,500 square foot TI. So he says, so what we're gonna see is probably some projects where we're just gonna say it was originally permitted under this code, and we're using those requirements. So we'll see a lot of that. All right, so the next item on the amendments was marijuana related occupancies. So I think all jurisdictions have adopted something that says we need to clean the air that comes out of those. But they don't have any, they were complaining that they don't have any way to, what does that mean? So unfortunately, ASHRAE still doesn't have any documentation on what to do. So I just kind of was searching around and finally found something from a county in Oregon that was pretty well defined. And it gave some really explicit detail on how to make sure that we're ventilating and what the air that's discharging is going to be what we consider, cleaned air. So, and that's what this whole section 408, it goes through 408.1, 2, 2. All these sections here, which defines it gives some pretty explicit directions on how to deal with marijuana facilities. And I know it's a problem because I have friends that live there a couple miles away and they still could smell it, and so I know it is an issue, and I know it's becoming a growing, no pun intended, a growing issue with these places being more urban and more next door to where you live and where you work. So anyway, so that's why I just thought this was a pretty well-defined description, and I basically just copied it verbatim, rather than trying to come up with something new. So anyways, that's what this whole section 408 is. So that defines that. Yes.
Does that apply to existing buildings where we're not changing anything?
No, it would only apply to, I would think it would only apply to new buildings,
Okay.
right? And only buildings that are under the 24 code.
Are you sure? Because the city has requirements to deal with that air.
They do, but they didn't define any requirement for that.
So
So
where does that put us then?
an existing, somebody could say they used their own technique. And that's the problem that everybody was running into, is they didn't know what's they were counting on whoever submitted it that works. So,
Is that your view, Dan?
Well, obviously, we don't have that, but I would agree that this is strictly for anything in the fall, 2024. Outside. that would be the topic.
Right.
Yeah, because it's not really a new requirement, but it's a specific solution to something that was required.
Well, it is, it's a whole new section.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not even in, it's not even in this, right?
As code committee, you take
Right.
prerogative to address it for with this
And
standard, there's evidently based on what Ken was saying, had been tested. It is being utilized in the county authority.
right. And I believe it's not in ASHRAE and it's not in IMC only because it's not a nationally accepted thing yet. And so they're just making it, they're letting it fall on the local jurisdictions to deal with it. And the problem I had was there really was no, let's do this and step by step that you guys could check and verify that it's being done, and the design engineer could follow it and say, yeah, I can do steps 1, 2, 3. There was just, hey, we needed clean air coming out. So what does that mean? And so, and that leaves it up to, well, a wide interpretation.
Well, the scenario I see is got permitted under the previous code.
Right.
The vague requirements. The neighbors complain that it's not being properly filtered per the regulation that was in place
Yeah,
when they got their permit.
yeah, it's gonna, that could
I could see
be,
the city coming in and enforcing those
Right.
requirements.
Are these facilities registered with the state to be able to
that's
produce
good. I don't think so.
marijuana products?
I think it's just a free for all right now.
Oh,
Right? I mean, I think they're just making, that's why it's a cash basis, they're just growing it, producing it, and there is no FDA, no nothing about it, right? And they can sell it and people could use it
Well,
and ingest it,
federally, it's still illegal.
right? So I think that's why until it becomes legal and I think once it becomes legalized and once it becomes regulated, that's when ASHRAE and IMC will start jumping in. But until then, jurisdictions have nothing other than, we don't want to smell it, but we don't know how to enforce it. So I think this gives some explicit direction. And that's all I could find, really, that gave pretty good detail on what to do. So what it basically does, it makes the building negative, and everything that gets exhausted has to be treated either with a carbon filter or a chemical filter to reduce the odors, and it gives description on even how to make those filters, how to install those filters. So anyways, I thought it was a pretty good.
Have you talked to anyone in that jurisdiction up there?
No, I have not.
Find out how it's working.
No, I did not.
Okay.
I did not.
Well,
So,
kind of like we gotta put something out there with specifics and then
right.
adjust it.
I think that's what it's gonna be. I think this will probably have to be amended once. If and when it becomes legalized and if and when ASHRAE and IMC take it on.
Maybe we could get Bob Sherry or somebody to contact somebody up there.
That's a good
find
point.
out how it's.
That's a good point. I will check with them.
Before we just go ahead and adopt it.
Okay,
And I would think a building official level person would be the appropriate one to talk about. Same level there.
And if you give me the county, I'll see if I can contact and Bob can contact.
yeah. Here, I'll just tell you what it was. I mean, I got all kinds of literature on it here. Going through different ones. Here it is. It was, Jackson County, Oregon. Be honest, I don't even know where Jackson County is. It's in Oregon. So
Okay.
I will reach out.
What else you got on the IMC?
Sec, let me just write this down.
Okay.
Okay.
That was a good find. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, then we get into where we were, the other amendments we were talking about were in Amendment 6, in Section 607. And that one was the one where we talked about the radiation dampers needing, the difference between static and dynamic dampers. So Dennis actually was good enough to send me these paragraphs 4 and 5 that are there that he wrote out, and I just copied them verbatim because I thought they were fine, and I didn't have any qualms with how he had written them. So if everybody else was okay, that basically is saying you could use static dampers, but here's how we need to shut down the fan coil. And realize most of this section is for apartments, which, as everyone knows in this area and throughout the country, it seems like are going gangbusters, right? So, let's see. I think section. There was another section 607. Where was that? Hold on. Oh, there was 60. Is that in here? Yeah, there was 2 parts of section. The first part of the 607.6.1 had to do with we just added a word, a phrase that basically said it could be in the wall or the floor. It needs to be the 4-inch diameter duct needs to be in the wall or the floor ceiling assembly. Because I think I gave you all drawings last time that once it goes into that assembly, it's not within the wall cavity. So if we just added, it could be as long as it's in either one, it'll be fine. So that's basically what that brings. And I think that was basically the rest of it were just still adopting some of these standards that haven't been still aren't in the code as far as using water cooled, and I do see it. The culprits are they use domestic water to cool their air conditioning or their cooling systems, and the culprits are ice cream places. They just run water through it to keep it from overheating, and medical facilities. Those are the 2 culprits that just use domestic water for cooling. And so it just goes down the drain. It cools the equipment and goes down the drain. So that's what we're trying to avoid by adopting that or adding that amendment, because that's not a code. It's not in the codes, so that you can't do that. And the last one was just a footnote that Dan included too, because I'm just so adamant about it. This whole thing with Bob was kind enough to give me the differences between the 18, what had changed in the 21 code, and then what had changed in the 24 code for every section. Of the 12 pages on the IMC that he gave me, I think 7 of those pages were on chapter 11. Chapter 11 has to do with all the refrigerant issues which we're going to face, which are going to be just a disaster. I don't know. Still don't know how that's going to be dealt with as far as in another. He does. In another, as I mentioned, because as of January 1, all the refrigerants are going to be what's classified as somewhat flammable. And that's all refrigerants, and which means that they now have to be in these ventilated shafts, fire-rated shafts, which nobody has now. They just run in walls. They run above bladed ceilings. They run above hard ceilings. They run everywhere. And every building's going to require this. And when they go to replace their air conditioner, come January of next year, and I don't know how it's going to be enforced. I just don't, because none of them have shafts. And it's not only apartments are going to be hit hard, but so is every building that's more than 2 floors. And it's also going to make, because of this whole refrigerant change, it's going to make VRF systems, which everybody's trying to go to, these variable refrigerant flow systems that everybody talks about, it's going to make those basically you won't be able to use them anymore. So those are gonna go, away. So-
Any building or just? the
And
three
just
story?
any building.
Because of the volume of.
Because of the volume of refrigerant. So it's a sad thing, but it's a federal thing. So I don't know how to deal with it. Cause it's an EPA requirement that they change. And they just seem, now, what I do know is the manufacturers are finally getting some pushback against the EPA, and so some of the dates are being extended. But as far as I know, nothing's been formally changed. So, I don't know.
It's
So
like a
that's-
bit of an overkill, because gas lines.
Yeah, natural gas runs everywhere. It could run through your house, it could run through all that stuff, and it's an unlimited supply of highly flammable explosive gas as compared to a refrigerant, which is limited volume, very small amounts. And it's somewhat flammable. So it takes 600 degrees before it will actually burn. And then it won't burn, as soon as I can burn something else, it just won't burn itself until it's 600 degrees.
Decentral status works, whereas natural gas is not.
Well, I guess the question is, can you put an odor?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Would that be?
and you probably could, but it's just not now.
No, well, I'm saying the way it's written, if somehow you're gonna put an odorant in that.
Yeah,
That could be an alternate, this requirement.
I would hope it would, but right now, nothing is been proposed for that.
Right, plus it's a finite volume.
It is a totally finite,
Like natural gas.
we're talking about
Which.
4 or 5 pounds, a little container of it.
Right.
Leaking out, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, so those were everything that I had.
Okay.
And like I said, and that's my soapbox for the chapter 11, but, so,
Anything else on the IMC?
nope,
Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to item 3, the fuel gas code. Anything?
no, I think.
Last time we,
Last time we talked, I thought, Clayton or somebody or Bob was gonna try to put together what the changes were from, 21 and 24. And,
Well, Clinton sent something out, but it was only concerning the amendments.
What, in your deal was that, I thought Bob sent down. He sent out looks like it's a 12-page deal on the international fuel gas comparison between.
oh, okay, I forgot he sent that one out. That's the one that, yeah, okay. Yeah, I completely forgot that he sent that out.
Yeah, what I got, like, was the amendments. The only amendment was that the administrative part of the code.
Hmm.
So the city's not proposing any.
That's what they have on the.
Yeah, so,
okay, so maybe we'll just cover this at the next meeting, give us a chance to look through that, right? That information. So,
yeah, so if we can maybe we could distribute that. Angie, did he send it to you at all, or?
So all the meeting material should be on our website.
Okay. Okay, so
I'm
maybe it
not-
is
I'm
there.
not sending you
Perfect. So it should be there then.
Just something to watch out for. I noticed particularly in the building code, there's a lot of changes to definitions and new definitions. You really don't know how that impacts it until you get to specific section of the code. And you get deep in the weeds, it always goes back to the definition that determines the outcome of the code determination, so.
Right.
As we go through the code, we need to keep that in mind, that we go back and check the definitions.
Right.
Okay, well, let's continue that at the next meeting. Give us a chance to look through it a little closer.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Cause I've been through it and I didn't have any other comments other than there was that one, but I think we all kind of got that one clarified.
Okay. And so moving on to item 4, the IBC chapters 1 through 8 comparison. So
So this also, there was it on, posted on our website, Clayton had prepared a comparison.
side by side, right? And Dan, I think you also sent that. Didn't you?
We have a same comparison or not?
The chapter 1 read, I think you did. Like last week.
Last week.
Well, Clayton,
I'm not
Clayton set that up, or
I got one from him.
from him?
Yeah.
Okay,
I know I had sent out the changes that Ken had suggested, the IMC, and then I did send out the same IBC stuff I sent out for the production.
Right.
My understanding is because of IMC, people.
Yeah, because I got that, and I got the,
Fire district, I
district.
sent it to fire districts.
right, came with that. Okay. So I know we're still digesting the chapter 1 through 8 comparison. Does anybody have anything to add today? Any comments, insights?
when you look at it, there's a lot of changes.
Oh, yeah.
Additions to the,
Definitions, yeah.
and the new definitions fall into 2 categories. I see. One is there's new technology, so it has to be defined. And 2 is there's changes, which I don't know what the impact is just by reading the definition. Again, it goes back to the code section, then you have to go back to the definition to see how to interpret it, so.
Yeah, because there were a lot of new terms that were defined. I noticed that.
Right.
Okay.
Limited verbal or physical assistance, that's a big one. It's down to the. I don't, that's a new term. So what does that mean? I don't know. Let's see back to that
Dig into the
section.
section, kind of where that's referenced.
Yeah, this impacts like assisted living.
Right.
You know, there's various levels of impairment, physical or cognitive. And that's always been kind of a free floating definition, so. We'll just have to keep that in mind when we get to that section to see how that impacts that.
Okay.
So,
And the only thing I had was, like I said, so chapter 7 will be adding the same things we added in chapter 6 of the IMC. Will be adding them because they're the exact same same paragraphs. They just have them in both sections, in both IBC and IMC for some reason.
And you said that was chapters.
Chapter 7, yeah. Yeah, I'll go.
Chapter 6 in there.
Yeah, chapter 6 in the IMC is the same, has the same references as chapter 7 in the IBC. I just got to match up the right paragraphs.
And the other thing that Dan had sent related to the IBC was the amendments to the IBC.
They were essentially the county amendments.
Right. Updated slightly.
Yeah, anything that was in, I mean, obviously, Joe went through.
Right.
This stuff, but I did make some of the updates in red or some stuff that changed and what's over the patch.
Yeah, it didn't look like there was a lot, some of it was just wording. You know, just taking words.
One thing that we did add in section, 105.2, We added, item number 20 on residential, building replacements. My understanding, Mark, maybe you can further on this, that the city now has the, policy where they don't require permits for window replacements.
I believe that's not level. I was thinking penalty.
Yeah, they must, and I don't know, we don't really have. I'm pretty sure Clayton had written that policy, so I was just gonna put it in the amendment, so the city and county were the same on them. So I just said residential window and door replacements in buildings legally permitted. Existing safety glazing shall be replaced with safety glazed windows. Existing emergency escape and rescue windows shall be same size or larger as window being replaced.
So these are exemptions.
Yeah, that would be the exception, when you would do exception.
Okay.
Required. A permit, of course, would be like anything that doesn't require a permit, so technically we still require to meet by focus.
Right. Okay. So if you haven't done so, look through those as far as the IBC amendments.
You know, my concern is the definitions.
Right.
One is a change of occupancy. They added accessibility, increase in accessibility. What does that mean? That's one of those things. I'm not sure what the.
Well, plus when we get to the existing building code, we'll have to see how that has been addressed because there's a change of occupancy issue in there also.
Well, if you have no change of occupancy and you have an increase in accessibility requirements, that's considered a change of occupancy.
So they're saying essentially that would require tenant improvement, change of occupancy.
Well, it's always been a problem with existing buildings on the scope and accessibility.
Yeah.
It's 20% of construction costs. When it applies, when it doesn't, but this change of occupancy and to include accessibility, it's not clarified. I think it's complicated. Right? What to go through and see.
The other thing I did, Brent, was, in section 1609. 0.6, used to be 0.5, you know, it's 0.6.11. I, just kind of updated the, terminology and eliminated clip and made that connected. So I saw that mentions.
Right.
Thirds.
Which makes sense because there's any number of connections that can be used that it's not necessarily clear. Right. That all makes sense.
And then there's some things you probably need to clarify. Like they have fences more than 7 foot. Well, according to the Tucson zoning code, anything over 6 foot has to be the setback. So you get into this problem where they go, oh, my fence is under 7 foot. I don't even need a permit. And you're having this issue now with storage rooms under 200 square feet. Doesn't require a permit. There are hundreds of those out there that are getting cited because they didn't get zoning.
Right. They didn't submit a site plan showing it.
You know, in good faith, they looked at it and said, oh, it doesn't require a permit. Well, now they're getting cited because they didn't get zoning. So I don't know, that's probably a clarification on the website.
Our zoning code did, we did get our zoning code to match. So.
Okay. Well, anything over 6 foot, we're kind of structural, and I'm not sure how this. But it impacts the zoning, so people are think they're exempt and they're getting cited, so. And we'll get the same thing with the fence definition.
I understand that. I'm just saying to try to prevent that, the county updated their zoning code, so they said.
Okay. So, but that, it's just, I guess, a note to staff, that maybe that needs to be clarified on the website, and people go and look at that. Because a lot of people understand there are multiple codes that they have to look at.
People think, oh, I don't need a building permit. That means I don't have to do anything. And that's not true.
Well, I think it used to be, but, you know, new staff, new interpretations of what that means.
But just like the storage buildings, you don't need a building permit, but you do need to submit a site plan.
Well, no, you need to submit a development plan because there are no site plans. So, well, what does that mean?
Um,
Yeah.
I just looked up the two chapters or two sections in the IBC. So the two ones that are gonna follow the IMC are, IBC section 716.6.6, or I'm sorry, 716.6.1. And the other one is IBC, section 717.6.2.1.2. So those are the same ones that we just amended in the IMC. Yeah.
Okay, anything else on item 4, ITC?
I think the one thing we need to do is get together with the various jurisdictions and the fire districts on these R4 or I1 occupancies. As the county and city has an exception for the 1 hour separation of the sleeping areas, fire districts do not. They have different requirements. They require a manual pull station. City of Tucson Fire Department does not. I mean, it's a confusing enough section of the code anyway, without people having different requirements, so. It might be worthwhile to set everybody down and just go over those occupancies. They are a headache.
Yeah, unfortunately, what happens is the inspectors come out and they interpret the code slightly different as well. And so they run into that. So you've already routed in for a pull station. Now you've got to relocate it. You know, once the inspector comes out. So I completely, unless you take that power out of the inspector's hands.
Well, you know, it's like the code says you have to have at least one manual pull station. Tucson Fire Department says you don't need any. It's become a mess, and then this assisted living thing's kind of evolved over the years. The code hasn't really kept up the various uses, so.
It seems like, yeah, the building department people need to meet with the fire people and also work on their communication with their inspectors.
We always have free inspections.
Branch inspections.
We have rapid inspections with all the jurisdictions. A lot of times, issues getting inspectors out there, but you just tell them, you don't want big changes. You know, Development Services already reviewed this, or the county's already reviewed this, and now you're coming out and you're terminating it. So let's get on the same page.
Yeah, well, you know, the county and city came up with this exception for 1 hour separation of
Yeah.
a tenant under.
Yep.
Well, the fire inspector may have no idea that that exists. Then you get into this discussion. Yeah, it's a specific part of the code that needs to be agreed with, or coordinated.
Right, so it's more of an internal between the different departments and also their inspectors to come up with a consensus between them, which way it's supposed to be enforced and matched with the written codes.
Well, because it causes issues, because if you use the county and city exception for the 1 hour separation, and the fire district comes out, they don't even know about that exception. And, you know, you're under construction, and once construction starts, changes get expensive.
So anything else on item 4? Okay, item 5, call the audience. Is there anything out there?
And you were see, I found that sometimes using my own technical ignorance is the way to start a conversation. On the mechanical code here, particularly chapter 11, I've heard two things from the experts. One is this is not as big as a public safety risk as the feds are wanting us to believe. Number two, I think I heard you say that eventually this could lead to making every building in Tucson basically usable. Take a look around. My understanding of the mission and the responsibility of this committee is to make recommendations as to which of these amendments are to be adopted and enforced locally. So based on what I'm hearing, I think you have the power and maybe the responsibility to recommend against incorporating the whole of chapter 11. Yeah, I don't know if you can do that. That's just wishful thinking on my part, but it just seems like that's a whole train wreck coming down the road. And again, I want to emphasize the housing affordability issue which we're experiencing here. So, you can't build apartments affordably, then you won't build them. And folks will build them. Thank you.
I mean, it's a valid point, and it's the EPA has found a group that is willing to try to make things greener, promote that whole idea. And so what happens is they unfortunately what it's doing is it's creating refrigerants that are now no longer as efficient, no longer as safe as the original refrigerants that we had. The problem is that they're mandating these changes into the manufacturing industry. So we're getting these refrigerants, whether we locally want them or not.
Yeah,
And then the codes are trying to keep up with these new refrigerants, and they are overreacting. But I don't know how to stand up and say locally that, yeah, we can't accept this is an overreaction.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I understand. So basically the feds are requiring changes to the actual mechanical units.
Correct.
We don't control.
Yeah, the manufacturing of them.
Right.
Right.
But we do control how those units are connected to the structure.
Correct. We could come back and say that the things like the fire rated chase, is an overreaction. And we could come back and say, that, especially for A2Ls, which is, they even created a new classification for refrigerants. It used to just be, they were A's and A1 and A2 and B1 and B2. Now they've created this A2L, which is, A is, it's non-toxic, but the 2 means it's flammable, but the L means it's low flammability. So in other words, what they found is it takes a very large fire just to burn the refrigerant, let alone have it started. So they created a new classification for it because it's so, otherwise it'd be even more restrictive. And so then with that new classification, they just group it into even hazardous refrigerants, such as ammonia. So they group it in with the same kind of classification with that and making it go. So I guess we could come back and we could say for the A2Ls, which is what they're going to be, we don't require so long as it's enclosed in a wall or some assembly, that it's acceptable. And it doesn't need to be ventilated because it is a limited amount. I mean, I don't know if that puts us in a liability situation, because now we're telling them that this, I don't see how it would, because again, it's a limited amount of refrigerant.
Well, and again, by comparison, natural gas.
Right. Yeah. Huge, unlimited supply and highly flammable as compared to this, which is a very limited supply.
A question, this code has been recently published. It's new in the 2024.
No, it was actually published in the 2021.
Okay,
but the A2Ls are new. And so they just grouped the A2Ls with the
so
A2.
that's new in 2020.
Yeah,
So that being the case, industry-wide, it's a fairly new awareness of this
Right.
issue.
yes.
Has there been much published in, trade journals and
No.
things about that issue at all yet?
No.
Or I see a corollary to
Not that I'm
something that happened in the electrical industry back in, the publishing of the 1984 National Electrical Code. And when that code was published, they put out a completely different table of rated ampacity for the electrical wire. And it was significantly more conservative than the previous method, which had been in place since essentially the beginning of time on electricity. And resulted in things like you almost couldn't do any one service bigger than 2,000 amps if it was fed with underground wiring, because it was a new method that was based on a theory that when you grouped all these conduits together in one trench, they would usually heat each other and thus reduce the ability of the wiring to carry current without overheating itself. As I said, that was the theory, but there had been, literally decades of experience of not any problems with installations. And so there was, the code got published and there was huge pushback over the next code evaluation period. NEC is every 3 years. When they got to 1987, they took that new method and turned it into an option that could be used. But they put back all the old ampacity tables the way it was, and it has continued that way to this day. So the NFPA, which is, really a consensus-based code that anybody can write in a comment to have a code changed, reacted to a situation that to me seems sort of similar and corrected itself. I'm sorry, I don't remember what we did locally with regard to local amendments to the 84 code. I don't remember. But, I think the question then becomes do we need to do an amendment? Anticipating there could be changes, or do we hold off because, do we buck the whole country with our own amendment? And that's one of the problems in writing these amendments. And what we're supposed to be doing is, unless we have a unique local condition, why do we have an amendment? But yeah, I recognize the issue.
Right.
There are technical solutions though, and it isn't every building. If it's a 2-story building or a 1-story building, it's unaffected. Correct. At least with regard to the shafts. So
So it could be something that we just say that for A2L refrigerants, which is going to be the new refrigerants, that the shafts are not required. It could be a simple 1-sentence thing. Yes.
Are there definitions of what the shafts are to be, where a manufacturer started creating products that could be used as shafts, which would eliminate a lot of the extra stuff?
That's our intent too, is that I would think that manufacturers are going to start creating double wall refrigerant pipe. But as of now, nobody has that. It's a product that has not been invented yet.
And what they've done in the past too is run a 4-inch PVC up and run the refrigerant pipe through that PVC as well.
Right, and
And
that,
that creates essentially a chase,
right. And so,
and it vents out just like a plumbing chase.
right. So there are options we could do that. That's the biggest thing I see is this shaft issue.
But would that be required in a 2-story? You got to split.
No, it's only required, you're allowed, per this section of the code and per the ASHRAE, it says you're allowed to penetrate 1 floor.
One, okay.
So once you get to 2 floors, you have to have a shaft. So it has to be a ventilated shaft. So, you know, that, and then they give the requirements for the ventilation, which is really steep. So, yeah,
It does seem like the practical method may very well be that people would have to reroute refrigerant piping
correct.
or relocate outdoor units.
But then they're rewiring.
Well,
Because,
granted, there's more cost,
Right.
but there are technical solutions that wouldn't completely make it impossible to deal with building.
Correct. And we've got apartments under construction right now where we're having meetings with contractors and the owners and saying, you know, for 3-story units and even for, we got a 3-story office building that we're doing, and we're saying, yeah, we better do this. Otherwise, I don't know what they're gonna do in the future. So, but during new, it's okay. You could probably figure it out. But it's the existing that's gonna be where I'm saying it's gonna be.
And this equipment goes in, and I keep hearing estimated lifespan is 15 to 20 years or
Yeah.
so for unit type equipment.
Right.
So, it goes in 2025. 15 years later, 2040 is when they're gonna have to really start dealing with it.
Yeah. And I think that's what everybody's doing, is just kicking the can down the road and figure we'll come up with something by then. But you know, you put something in, somebody puts something in, or there, what the problem is there, the existing units that are 20, 25 years or 15 to 20 years old.
Yeah,
these
okay,
existing
so that's
three-story
right.
buildings,
The
crack.
day after this code is adopted,
Right,
you're gonna have your first old unit that fails.
Correct.
Has to be replaced.
yep. And that'll have the new A2L, and anything that's 3 stories or more. I don't know how they're gonna do it. Cause now they're gonna have to go in and either relocate the condensing unit to be on grade, or they're gonna have to provide a shaft, a ventilated shaft, or they're gonna have to, you know, or they're gonna have to route the refrigerant piping down the exterior walls, which, I mean, I don't know how you do that. So, I mean, there's just, so maybe it is that we just say, I mean, we could, as a group, say, you know, we don't want to have to do that and put that burden on people for what appears to be something pretty minimal.
As per what Dennis was saying, sitting on an NEC code making panel and teaching the code changes. I have seen many a time where a code changed in one cycle, people reacted, it was submitted, and it changed back, rechanged in the next cycle. So that's part of the process, is submitting to the code changes. At least for the NFPA codes, any of us can submit. The code panels look at it and then determine, based on their experience and knowledge, does it need to change? Word changing and justifications definitely affect us when we're looking at the new changes. So don't know, there may be enough pushback starting for the next cycle that it does get changed in the 7. Yeah, 3 years.
I know.
And then we'll be skipping the 27 and going to 2010. So those are things that we can look at, and as public input and stuff goes in, they start, I believe, at the beginning of the incoming year. So you'll be able to look at 24. You should be able to look at now if there are changes being put in toward those cycles and those things. Also help make your decisions and understanding. There may already be enough inputs going in to justify, like you're saying, and that'll help this committee also look at it and say, look, these are things coming up. It could be changing for
Right.
those reasons we're discussing.
So just to let you know how minor the change would be, section 11 09.2.5 describes refrigerant pipe shafts. Exception 2 says piping in direct refrigerant systems using group A1 refrigerants where the refrigerant quantity doesn't exceed the limits in this table do not need to have, basically, the exception is as long as it's an A1 refrigerant, it doesn't need to have the pipe shaft. We could just add to that A1 or A2L, and that solves it. In that exception. And because otherwise, like I said, I could see, especially if jurisdictions are gonna really enforce this come January, the first air conditioner that goes, I can see contractors saying, no, don't get a permit. It's just gonna be, it's gonna cause too much headache for everybody. And I really do. And especially in a big building where you've got, you know, well, we've started to see them fail, so we're gonna just replace 100 of them. Right?
Right, when they start to go,
Right. So they got a bunch of them replacing, and it's every, like I said, every 3-story building.
And it's basically the same initially.
It is in this, it's currently the same, but realize A2Ls really weren't around until just recently. And so ASHRAE, if you look at the amount of so ASHRAE is one of these continuous maintenance programs, so they're constantly changing. So that section, that ASHRAE standard of 15 and ASHRAE standard 34 have had more changes in it than all the other standards combined, because of the amount of refrigerant changes that are going on. All dictated by the EPA and these refrigerant manufacturers agreeing to do this stuff. You know, anyways, so should we go ahead and should I send something for the next go around and basically just accept that chapter or that section? We'll just add that to exception 2 where we say A1 and A2L. And then that eliminates it. And I think so what I'm still pushing is in new buildings, let's address it because we don't know what's gonna happen. And it is an added cost, but it's far less cost to do it before it's built than after it's built.
Would that exception only apply to existing buildings, the way you described it?
And new, we could just say,
Then that contradicts what you just said.
I know, and because this would be the minimum, and my fear is that on a new building, I'd hate an owner to get in there and then accuse me of, you know.
Well, that's a design decision you always made.
Correct.
The question though is whether code should exempt a new building. The problem that I have is I don't know what's gonna happen 3 years from now when the 2027 code is out. If that requirement is still in the code and there hasn't been a movement to change it, at what point are we taking Tucson out of the minimum standards for safety that codes are supposed to provide? And I know that there's some consensus here that it really isn't a big safety problem, but when you start bucking a nationally recognized code, you know, can that be argued?
Can these amendments, after adopted, such as Dennis is asking, can they then be re-amended for adoption? So like he says, in 27, we may look at and say, we need to go back with that exception now.
Or what we could do is maybe we make the exception for existing buildings. You know, and not put that burden on existing buildings for now. I mean, it's something that I think we are going to go back to. And to be honest, no manufacturer has built any of this equipment yet. It's not being even produced yet. But they're not allowed to ship any of the old refrigerants as of December 31st. So.
Like so many things will that end up being delayed.
There's push from the manufacturers to delay that. So far, nothing's been official. And the EPA has already volunteered, so you had to, you were no longer allowed to sell it and you're no longer allowed to install it as of January. Now it's, you're no longer allowed to sell it, but you can install it until
So that
26.
let all.
So they've already
product-
started moving, right?
The old
They've
product.
already started moving the dates. So,
That seems pretty common on, with agricultural regulations on the EPA.
Right.
They take a big step forward and
Right.
they back away from it
correct,
when they get this kind of pushback.
So,
right.
But again, we don't have enough information to really know what we should do.
It's still early. So I guess what we could do is I could propose two things. One with, if this is an existing building, we could add this amendment. And another, we could say for all buildings, we could add, it, which would be that, both of them would be easy exceptions to add right in that section.
So the
So,
ICC has put us in a bit of a predicament here.
yeah,
Because basically the philosophy is we're going to adopt the code and only make amendments for local petition. Which we've done, because you don't want an amendment as lengthy as the original code. But some of these are kind of premature, I think.
you know, we could propose it now. We're not gonna adopt these to what, probably September, October. So we'll know more what EPA is doing by then. So I could,
What is the schedule? We have a
Well-
January 1st adoption date.
we have January 1st adoption date, however, I found out last week that it doesn't look like the electronic version of the IECC, the 2024 IECC will even be published until the end of May, 1st of June.
Electronic version.
that tells you what we're in for there.
Electronic version, which also means the IRC will not be published, electronic version.
Isn't that already out?
Hmm.
Isn't the current version of the IRC already out?
Everything but the energy.
The end, chapter end, or section end, or whatever that is.
Chapter 11. So I haven't talked to Clayton. Clayton is currently in Florida at the Florida code hearings. Going to be talking about the required cooling that we've been talking about. So he may get more information on the actual published dates of those at that time. But my thought, I haven't discussed with Clayton yet, but I don't think we want to adopt any of the 2024s until we can adopt them all. To me, it's very confusing if we adopt everything but the IRC and the IEC. So,
Yeah, he's just showing me that, yeah, you can buy the IRC, but it's without the energy
This
section.
is the electronic version.
yeah,
It
no,
comes out before the printed version.
Right.
This is without energy.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
So that tells you what we're gonna be in for when we get that.
So, right, so right now, I think the goal would still be January 1st, but it may
Right.
not be possible based on.
And what's, some of the pushback on that is that, by the way, these new refrigerants, because they are less efficient. So to make equipment more efficient, the manufacturers are struggling, you know, so they become bigger, heavier, more material, more metal, more everything. So
They
you're
still have their efficiency standard.
to try to get to the efficiency that the old refrigerants were at. Yeah, so I guess that's the question. Do we want to just put that on shelf it now?
Yeah.
And then we'll address it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should come back to it when, if there is more information.
So-
Before the.
So why don't we keep it as an item on our agenda,
Right.
and we'll just continue to research it. But I think that's a really good point, because again, I would not imagine that people would get a permit if they had to make those changes. So.
Have a hard enough time getting to get the permit.
Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's that balancing act between
Right.
whatever hazard this new refrigerant might be making versus the hazard of work being done without permits and
Right.
inspections. And overall, where's our benefit? And for safety, and that balance may very well go to the permitting.
Okay, let's move on. Again, call the audience. Is there anything else? Yes.
I'd like to have a discussion with you about the state licensed facilities classifications compared to the fire code and how we can deal with it. Update some research on the other jurisdictions around the state done, and just have to come up with some sort of verbiage to address what the state requires compared to what the building fire.
Are you talking to the other fire districts, Golden Ranch and
Yeah.
Northwest?
Yeah, in fact, real quick, there's only one jurisdiction that I found was Scottsdale that actually changed their code. Like fire code had passed. And again, in a nutshell, the problem is with the number changes from 6 to 10 compared to 6 to 16, states requiring that the R4s are up to 10. So after that, there's new other requirements. However, they don't classify as high in the building fire.
Like, well, yeah, there's that gap between 10 and
Right.
16. That's kind of a no
And
man's.
so the state wants you to give them more restrictions, send them to the building side, the building code says you're not nine. So it's tough.
No.
However, Goodyear did make a change in their code. Put it in building code 308.5. Arizona State Department of Health Facilities, all facilities licensed by the state of Arizona Department of Health. Further known but not limited to as direct care, personal care, supervisory care, behavioral, residential agency, housing at least 6 and not more than 10 persons shall be considered parking. So they didn't put it in there, but they didn't address what do you do with the gap.
Yeah, it's code 16, not 10.
Right.
You know, then zoning in certain zones is 10.
Right.
This, well, I mentioned this earlier, I think before you came in, this whole R4, I1 thing has turned into a real mess.
And the state's very specific about how to treat them. You know, if here's our numbers, here's their requirements. Whether it's in the fire code, building code, they don't care. So,
Yeah, they have,
they left the gap there.
but you gotta comply with the law to get the license, because you gotta get a CMO.
So,
It's
just need to figure out how to tackle.
Sounds like a subcommittee.
I would say a subcommittee, and it is a total mess. And when you go through those R4s and you read the state and the local requirements, in the city and the county have an amendment to the 1 hour separation of sleeping quarters. It is.
And like I said, it really hasn't come up much. Finding that they were classified as power. You know, if they have a bigger than local house. It's very come up.
Well, the other issue is this manual poll stations. The fire department told me it wasn't required in an R4.
Because
Well, the code says that you have to have at least one. But your department says you don't need any. A half a one? No, but I mean, there are a lot of issues like
Yeah.
that. Sure, there's lack of coordination.
And I'm surprised we haven't run into that question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
You guys would be ready for those kind of.
yeah, well, yeah, I think a subcommittee is probably in order to,
Would you be willing to have that subcommittee, Rick?
since I'm the one that had got the headache.
Yes. Okay, let's get that moving. Because it sounds like there's some more to be done there.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. It's gonna take a while to
And I
sort
think
through
what
that.
we're doing on the fire side for now is pulling those changes out of our amendments.
Okay,
And then just treating it case by case, what the state requires. If we have to hit that. Problem between the Air Force and the ice, very much at all. But till then, I think we'll pull this out. Because it definitely clashes with the building.
Yeah, and I catch it all the time because clients come and go, well, also, they didn't do this,
Sure.
you know. And when are you guys adopting the fire code?
July.
The two other fighters are doing it for July too, July 1st. So we're gonna have a fire codes adopted July of this year and building codes adopted January 1st.
Well, maybe that can't later.
Or late, right. Being optimistic, January 1st. So there's,
And really, there's not a whole lot that we put in the amendments that have any direct conflicts with what the code does.
well, and here I'm gonna complain a little bit because I haven't seen your amendments.
Can you be able to send those out?
I believe so. They're all on the website.
Well, Golden Ranch and Northwest I got.
No,
Yeah, West End, right?
it was prior, wasn't it?
So right after the last meeting you guys had,
Right.
I got Tangy and she was gonna distribute it, so.
Is it on the website? Okay. Okay, so we want to coordinate that as much as possible. Some people that think that the building code and fire code are parallel.
Ish.
It's just, well, they look at the building code and say, well,
It gives
comply.
you a reference as it is in the fire.
In the, yeah. I mean, it's very coordinated in the original publication.
Yeah, at least 9 and 10.
And she, any luck?
Does anybody else want to be on the subcommittee?
Think where is it?
Huh?
I think,
Okay,
Because I think that was about 2 meetings ago, honestly.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's just check into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So to check on that. Okay. So I think we are finished. Do you want to make a motion to adjourn?
I move motion to adjourn.
Can. Favor? Aye. Opposed? Or adjourned? Thank you.
thank you.